Do you need to understand what it means to be an intellectual monster? I'll let you know directly up. Being a mental monster manner having a thoughts so sturdy and strategic that no one can control you, no one can smash you, and nobody can use your weaknesses in opposition to you. Machiavelli, the maximum feared and misunderstood philosopher in records, knew this. Most people live ruled through illusions, feelings, and fake hopes. They live in a fantasy global in which they trust being precise, noble, or naive gets them some distance. But Machiavelli made it clean. The one who masters their thoughts masters their destiny. Now, here's the ambiguity. I discovered that mystery to you inside the first few seconds. You already know what an intellectual monster is. However, right here's the key query. How do you reach that level of energy? How do you rework your way of questioning, feeling, and appearing till you emerge as a person impossible to manipulate? And this is wherein you want to live, due to the fact what's coming isn't quite phrases or superficial advice. We're going to decipher Machiavelli's standards that very few dare to use, seeing reality with brutal clarity, controlling your emotions until they end up equipment, studying the artwork of appearances, and executing with relentless motion. These are the pillars that flip an ordinary person into an intellectual monster. And if you preserve listening, you'll see how every certainly one of them can appreciably exchange your life, because what you're in search of is at the start, but what is going to surely remodel you is what comes next. To apprehend how to end up a mental monster, we must first have a look at the person who stimulated this idea, Niccolò Machiavelli. In his maximum well-known paintings, The Prince, Machiavelli didn't speak approximately noble heroes or dreamy leaders. He pointed out the raw reality of strength, that guys are egocentric, act out of self-interest, and if you need to survive, you can't be naive. He wrote, "Guys greater without difficulty neglect the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony." What does this imply? That human nature is harsh, and people who don't apprehend it are doomed to be wolfed. Here emerges the idea of the monster, now not a merciless or ruthless being without cause. However, someone who dares to see the arena because it genuinely is, now not as they desire it had been. It's a person who is aware that morality, kindness, and justice are useful concepts. However, within the realm of electricity, they are secondary to strategic readability and intellectual energy. Imagine Machiavelli's global for a moment: wars, betrayals, conspiracies. A prince who blindly trusted within the loyalty of his human beings or the goodness of his enemies turned into doomed to fail. That's why he recommended mental coldness, calculation, and strategy. Now ask yourself, how much has the arena modified since then? The truth is, almost nothing. Today, we don't fight in palaces or castles, but in corporations, relationships, politics, and social media, and the naive still lose. The origin of the mental monster, then, lies in accepting that life isn't truthful, that human nature isn't ideal, and that those who master their minds to navigate this truth have an absolute benefit over the rest. That's the start line. If you need electricity, resilience, or true freedom, you could have enough money to suppose like all of us else. You need to think like Machiavelli, strategically, with a vision that pierces through appearances. And when you receive this origin, you're equipped to take the first step toward genuine mental energy. Brutal readability. First pillar. Brutal clarity. Machiavelli insisted on something the majority never dare to stand: seeing reality as it is, no longer as you want it were. That is the first step to turning into a mental monster, growing imaginative and prescient so clear and brutal that not anything can deceive you. The general public stay in a kind of mental fog. They deceive themselves. They trust their pals will usually be there irrespective of what. They suppose they're valued at work just for being suitable. They trust love by myself is enough to preserve a courting. However, Machiavelli might say, folks that lie to themselves with illusions are doomed to lose energy, freedom, and admire. An intellectual monster does the opposite. They rip off the blindfold, even though it hurts. If a person to your existence gives nothing, however excuses, you see it really. If a mission isn't running, you receive it earlier than syncing with it. If fact is harsh, you face it without sugarcoating it with false hopes. This brutal readability is the muse of all energy because it permits you to make objective choices at the same time as others continue to be paralyzed. Consider it this way: a pace-setter who blindly trusts in the loyalty of all their allies can be betrayed. A businessperson who refuses to look their business is failing will lose the whole lot. Someone who ignores the caution signs and symptoms in a courting will grow to be broken. Machiavelli taught that the sector is governed with the aid of hobbies and hidden forces, and only folks that stumble on them with bloodless clarity have a hazard to survive and thrive. Becoming an intellectual monster isn't approximately hardening yourself for no purpose. It's about accepting that the truth, regardless of how uncomfortable, is the best strong foundation to construct upon. And what's the gain? If you have brutal readability, you stop living deceived, and whilst you stop living deceived, nobody can control you. The following step, after seeing truth with wakeful eyes, is even extra tough. Gaining knowledge of to control your emotions as opposed to letting them manipulate you. 2D pillar, strategic emotional manage. Machiavelli understood something most nonetheless don't grasp. Feelings are the best weak point of any person. Anger, fear, love, guilt. They're all invisible strings that may be used to manipulate you. The mental monster is aware of this and turns their emotions into gear, never chains. Reflect on consideration on this. How commonly have you made a decision in a moment of anger and later regretted it? How commonly have you permit euphoria or sadness sweep you away and ended up losing what you valued maximum? Machiavelli could call that a fatal mistake. For him, the one who governs their feelings governs the arena. However, pay interest. Controlling feelings doesn't imply suppressing them. A mental monster isn't a chilly gadget that feels nothing. They sense. However, they strategically pick out whilst to show, when to cover, and when to convert the one's feelings into electricity. Clear examples: at paintings, a person provokes you. The vulnerable react with anger and appearance terrible. The intellectual monster smiles, observes, and strikes again at the precise right moment, when it hurts the maximum. In a negotiation, the naive get determined to close the deal. The intellectual monster controls their anxiety, appears calm, and secures higher terms. In a private argument, the common individual breaks down and begs. The mental monster knows that showing neediness is losing control and acts with firmness. The key is to convert every emotion into strategy, anger into precise motion electricity, fear into alertness that prepares you, disappointment into reflection that strengthens you, joy right into a persuasion weapon whilst others let their protect down. Machiavelli would say that a prince who suggests vulnerability to their enemies has already misplaced earlier than the fight. And in our present-day lives, it's the equal. People who don't grasp their feelings emerge as slaves to others. The mental monster, however, is the master in their inner global, not because they don't sense, but due to the fact they understand each emotion is a useful resource to be used, no longer a master to obey. Third pillar, the artwork of appearances. Machiavelli turned into brutally sincere about it. It doesn't count number as a whole lot what you are, however, what others believe you are. Here lies one of the most misunderstood secrets of his philosophy. Perception is extra effective than truth. An intellectual monster doesn't simply grasp what they suppose and experience. Additionally, they master what they task to the world. They know humans rarely look beyond appearances. They choose primarily based on what they see, hear, and feel in the beginning glance. And if that's the case, why no longer use it to your benefit? Machiavelli counseled the prince to seem virtuous, just, and compassionate, although in practice they acted in a different way whilst necessary, no longer out of hypocrisy, but because he understood that photograph opens doorways that fact by myself in no way should. In current existence, this translates to, in enterprise, performing confident even in case you don't yet have all of the assets. That self-assurance draws traitors and allies. In relationships, projecting firm barriers, even in case you're doubting inner. That solidity inspires recognize. In social lifestyles, showing manipulate even in a disaster, because humans comply with individuals who mission electricity, now not weakness. A clean instance, think of political leaders. A few lacked wonderful technical qualities, however built such a strong photograph that thousands and thousands observed them blindly. The equal takes place with influencers, entrepreneurs, or public figures. They're no longer constantly the exceptional. However, they're the ones who quality master appearances. The error many make is obsessing over being true without method. They accept as true with displaying the entirety they feel or suppose will set them unfastened. The truth is, it makes them prone. The intellectual monster is aware of that authenticity isn't about emotionally bearing yourself to all people. It's about consciously finding out which version of yourself the arena needs to look. And what's the gain? When you grasp appearances, you now not only shield your true essence, you furthermore MGHT use that facade as both a guard and a weapon. Others suppose they recognize you. However, in reality, they only see what you choose to reveal. That's the Machiavellian strength of appearances. Fourth pillar, relentless action, but of course, it's no longer sufficient to peer, feel, and challenge. The intellectual monster has to take one extra step. Act with a firmness that terrifies. Because in case you assume an undertaking but don't execute, you're no longer a monster. You're an illusionist. Machiavelli's philosophy wasn't pretty much mirrored image and strategy. It changed into, particularly, approximately action. You could have brutal clarity, manipulate your feelings, and challenge the right picture. But in case you don't act, it all turns to smoke. The mental monster sticks out due to the fact they don't stay paralyzed. When the time involves decide, they execute with precision and without hesitation. Machiavelli found that princes who hesitated too much ended up losing the whole lot. Folks who moved with firmness, although they made errors, held on to energy. And this lesson nonetheless holds nowadays. In business, those who anticipate the ideal opportunity in no way begin. Those who act, analyze, adapt, and gain ground. In relationships, those who fear speaking actually get trapped in poisonous dynamics. People who make firm selections free themselves and circulate forward. In non-public lifestyles, folks that constantly delay for day after today die while not having attempted something. Relentless motion isn't impulsiveness. It's no longer approximately transferring without questioning, however, approximately now not staying frozen when you already understand what to do. A mental monster thinks, plans, after which executes with the force of a person who allows no setbacks. Historical instance: Alexander the Incredible conquered half the sector now, not due to the fact he always had the best assets. However, due to the fact he acted earlier than others may want to react. Modern-day instance: marketers who launch initiatives with limited sources and scale them into empires, at the same time as hundreds of dreamers preserve watching for an appropriate second. Right here's the reality. The sector doesn't belong to the neatest or the kindest, but to individuals who take movement at the same time as others are still wondering. That's the essence of the mental monster. A strategic thoughts that doesn't live in thoughts, but transforms those thoughts into concrete realities. And the transformation whilst you integrate all the pillars: brutal readability, strategic emotional manage, mastery of appearances, and incessant action. You reach the very last nation. A thoughts that doesn't spoil, a spirit that doesn't bend, and an energy that depends on nobody else. That's the realization we're arriving at, and we'll tie all of it collectively in a final message in order to etch the true art of turning into a mental monster into your mind. From the start, I revealed it to you. Being a mental monster means having a mind so sturdy that no person can break or manipulate you. However, now you understand it's not just one idea. It's a course built on pillars that rework the way you stay. Brutal clarity, seeing reality as its miles without self-deception. Strategic emotional control, using your feelings as weapons, not chains. The artwork of appearances, projecting what the sector desires to look without exposing yourself. Relentless motion, executing without hesitation while it's time to determine. Together, these ideas create the mind that Machiavelli might have referred to as worthy of a prince, and today we will call it worth of a person virtually loose. Due to the fact being a mental monster doesn't mean being cruel or ruthless. It means being invulnerable in a global that continuously tries to break you. It's having the lucidity to see past lies, the calm to no longer be swept away by means of impulses, the intelligence to manipulate your picture, and the energy to turn notion into movement. That's the proper transformation. Going from being one of the crowd to being a person guided via solid principles and an indestructible mind. The world is full of the susceptible who wait. The intellectual monster acts, leads, and transcends. If this message resonated with you, then you've already taken step one in the direction of your own metamorphosis. Now, what comes subsequent relies upon you, applying every of those pillars until they come to be part of your identity. And in case you want to maintain diving deeper into these ideas and uncover greater secrets of Machiavellian philosophy applied to trendy life, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and depart alike. Keep in mind, existence doesn't reward the naive, it rewards folks who emerge as intellectual monsters. The query is, do you have got the braveness to be one of them?